So hello, I'm Pittsburgh Pat. This is how you make Swiss steak. I was going to make dinner for my girlfriend on Monday night because she's awesome, and this is how I did it, in case you ever want to know how to make Swiss steak. So here you can see in this photograph, you've got your basic ingredients, which are steak. Just had to turn down the volume there. So that you can hear me and not me unwrapping the steak. I don't talk through this video that I'm taping over anyway. All right, so there you go. Take the steak out. Take it out with a fork so you don't have to handle it with your hands. Get bacteria on it. Safety procedures here, people. You got potatoes, crushed tomatoes. That looks like garlic powder. There's some salt substitute, but you can use regular salt, I guess, if you want. There's pepper back here. There's also a jar of spaghetti sauce. I didn't use that, though. No, I used the tomatoes. But you could use spaghetti sauce if you wanted to. What's this back here? I don't even know. All right, so the first thing you do with Swiss steak is you take a cut of meat. This is London broil. London broil is basically a top round steak. You really should use, you could use bottom round steak for this. The point is you want to use a very low priced meat. You're going to try, don't use filet with this. Don't use New York strip. You'll be wasting your money because you can just grill those and they taste fantastic. This one, if you just threw it on the grill, this cut of meat, I don't think so. You would have a tough time chewing it because the fat is very stringy in this. So what you do is you take a fork and you stab it. You just make holes in the steak on both sides, because what you're trying to do here is, whoa, that focus is bad. What you're trying to do here is create, you're tenderizing the steak, but you're also creating a way for the tomatoes and the broth to get into the steak to cook it all the way through. This is, like I said, London broil. London broil, one of the reasons London broil, if you know anything about it, is cut very thin into thin slices is because it's very hard to eat in cubes or chunks. So that's why I'm taking a fork to this. And I'm going to do it again, as you'll see. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here. You want to preheat your oven. I don't know if I showed that or not. Well, you preheat the oven to I think I had it at 475. All right, here we go. I am getting ready to put the steak in the, I guess that was me preheating the oven. Let's go back to that and see what we got here. Okay, so it's 4:42 in the evening. I'm going to set the oven on 350 and get that thing warm. All right, then we go back over to the steak. So take some saran wrap or any plastic wrap or parchment paper or foil or whatever you want, and cover the steak. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tenderize it. Now you could take a meat mallet if you have one of those, or you can just take a hammer, since you've got it covered. You're not going to come into contact with the steak. So the plastic wrap forms a barrier so that the germs don't get it. Or you can just do what I'm doing and take your fists and pound the steak. So you want the steak to be about maybe a half inch, between a quarter inch and a half inch thick. You don't want it to be a full inch thick or 3/4 inch thick, which is about what this is cut at. So you can see I'm really taking my time and making sure this thing is flat. And that's your technique for tenderizing the steak. Also for a nice little forearm workout. And don't hurt yourself doing this, by the way. So after that's done, take the plastic off. And now I realized that by tenderizing the meat, I had actually closed all those holes. So I took the fork to the steak again, and I started opening holes. And I have to tell you, this time the fork penetrated the meat much more quickly and much easier because I'd already aerated it kind of. So I'm going to do this here. You'll see me do it on both sides. I do it on both sides of the meat. And actually the focus here is pretty good. You can almost see the previous holes, and you can definitely see the new puncture marks I'm making in the meat. So my hands are clean here, folks. Wash your hands in between these steps. You definitely don't want any cross-contamination. You want to make sure that your hands are... Every time I step away from the camera, I'm pretty much going to the sink here and washing my hands. So make sure you do that. All right, so I put some oil in the pan here, and we're heating up the pan on the stove. And this is a Dutch oven. Be careful, these handles are metal. If you have a Dutch oven like this, you're going to want to handle it with pot holders. Okay, I'm about to throw the steak in the pan. When you put the steak in the pan, well, I guess I already did. So when you put the steak in the pan, take it from the cutting board over to the pan, drop it in very, very slowly. Slowly. You don't want that hot oil jumping out at your hand. I got some really bad burns one time making this recipe, so you definitely don't want to do that. Now, some recipes call for you to coat the steak in a mixture of flour and dry mustard, and you can certainly do that if you want to. But to me, that's just an extra step and extra calories. This is my modification of the classic recipe. So you can see the steaks in the pan right now. We're going to brown that a little bit. What you're doing here is you're browning the steak. It creates what's called the Maillard effect. Maillard was the name of a chef, French chef, I think from the late 1800s. And he, anyway, he realized that when you brown meat, certain chemical reactions happen and it creates more flavors. So that's what the Maillard reaction is. And that's why you brown meat generally. So I'm going to flip it over here. You can see it's almost done, but I want a little more of a caramelization, if you want to call it that. The dark parts of the meat. So now the meat's browned. We're going to do that on the other side too. We can skip ahead a little bit. You can see the meat smoking. Now in the meantime, I'm going to come over here and cut some garlic. So here's how you smash garlic. So you take the flat edge of the knife, you put the clove down, and you smash it with the flat part of the blade. Keep your fingers and your skin away from the sharp edge of the knife. Keep the sharp edge of the knife away from you while you're doing this. You cut the real fleshy part out at the bottom, and the rest of the peel comes right off. Make a bear claw when you're cutting these things. Keep your fingers out of the way of the blade. Rock the blade back and forth. Here you got some diced garlic. All right. Now salt on top of the steak and a very generous amount of pepper. Here's the pepper. You could do this on both sides if you wanted to, but then you just have burnt pepper on the bottom of your steak, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense at this point. All right, I'm probably opening a can of something, probably the can of crushed tomatoes, yep. Okay, so there's your crushed tomatoes. That's what's going to give you your principal flavor in the Swiss steak. Swiss steak is basically stewed steak with stewed tomatoes. Now, once you put your tomatoes in, get a clean fork, not the fork that you used before, but a clean fork, because you don't want the bacteria from the old fork getting onto the steak. And lift the steak so that the juices from the tomatoes go underneath the steak. Because if you don't, you're going to create a little vacuum there. The steak's going to burn on one side, and on the other side it's going to cook, and it's going to be stuck to the bottom of the pan when you get done. That's definitely not something you want. All right, the canned potatoes, you could peel your own potatoes and throw them in here. You can certainly do that. The canned potatoes are neat though, because you can just open the can, throw them in there, juice, water and all, doesn't matter. The extra liquid's going to help submerge the steak, and you definitely want the steak submerged. So I used 2 cans of potatoes. You could put carrots in here. When you were, you could caramelize onions also at the bottom of this pan while you're cooking the steak, or after, or before you cook the steak in the oil. But I find that the onions just get slimy when you leave them in the pan, so I didn't use onions. Now I'm seasoning this with oregano. Oregano is going to be our primary herb, along with basil. So oregano and basil and tomatoes. unbelievable combination, classic Italian combination. Can't go wrong with that, even though it's called Swiss steak. Now you can see it's starting to boil, or it's starting to bubble. That's good. That's what you want. And I put more pepper on top because I like myself some pepper. And that's about it. It's almost ready for time to put the lid on. Yep, there I am, putting the lid on. Now you could simmer this on the stovetop for a while if you wanted to. But I'm going to put it in the oven because the oven's up to temperature now, and you put this in the oven at, what did we say? We had that at 350, I think. Okay, into the oven it goes, and let's take a look. We're at 350 degrees, and I think we're going to do this for about 2 hours. I started at 2 hours. You can go a little bit longer if you want. And that's it. That's basically how you make Swiss steak. So you can see the entire prep time was about 16 minutes. So it's really easy to do. Basically foolproof. Especially with this new oven, I can just, once it's up to temp, it starts counting down the time, and then it'll shut off. So I don't even have to think about this now. I have another video of what it looks like when it comes out, and so look for the part 2, and you'll see the final product. So that's how you make Swiss steak in basically 16 minutes and 13 seconds. I'm Pittsburgh Pat. Thanks for watching. Watch the next video and see how the Swiss steak turned out.